My name is Alara Quinn, 30 years old. I landed in Nashville with a carry-on full of wrinkled sweaters and one small paper box that I'd folded myself on the tray table from Tokyo to LAX and then again to Tennessee, as if the act of remaking it would steady my hands. Dad's turning 60 had always sounded like a soft benchmark in my mind. Laughter on the deck, cheap candles, the good plates, with enough warmth to loosen old knots. The night air smelled like charcoal and honeysuckle when I walked into his backyard, lanterns swaying as if they too were deciding whether to stay. The box wasn't pretty enough for the gift table, not next to the lacquered bags beaded with ribbons and metallic bows. My paper was off-white and a little soft at the edges, scored by thumbnails and long flights. I set it down anyway, centered like an apology I didn't owe anyone. No one noticed, not yet. Country music hummed from a speaker on a picnic bench. Dad was a silhouette by the grill, and Mom's laugh came in bright bursts from the drink station. It should have been easy. Still traveling light, huh? Kelly's voice arrived before she did, which was something I remembered about my sister. A presence that never needed a doorway. Sequins flashed when she stepped under the lanterns, rose gold dress, legs like a runway. Matthew hovered behind her, phone in one hand, the other doing that half-ownership hold on her elbow as if he were also an accessory. "You and your minimalist chic," Kelly said sweetly, then looked past me, scanning for someone shinier to greet first. I smiled. It was a muscle memory I'd kept even when Tokyo felt like falling downstairs in slow motion, language flat on my tongue, coding at dawn, adding notes to my phone that just read, "Survive." "It's good to see you," I said, and meant it in the way you mean the end of turbulence. "We brought truffle mac and cheese," Matthew announced to nobody in particular. The watch on his wrist caught the lantern light like a mirror that only reflects itself. He dropped the foil pan on the buffet table with an exaggerated sigh, then squinted at the gift pile. "Which one is yours?" he asked me. Nathan from Dad's shop clapped my shoulder and drifted off before I could answer. The yard had that buzzing calm of people who think things are fine. "That one," I said, nodding toward the paper box. Kelly tilted her head. "You didn't," she said, and for a second I thought she'd guessed. But then she laughed. Light, easy, a blade sheathed in velvet. "You made arts and crafts." I felt my jaw work and let it rest. I had promised myself to keep the real secret a secret until Dad could hear it first. I had promised myself 100 promises from Canada to here. My lawyer, Patricia, had texted when she landed, "At your call," which was her way of saying she would be near enough to catch whatever fell. Mom swept me into her arms then, her perfume something clean and nostalgic. "You look tired," she said in a way that meant I looked like myself with the volume turned down. "But happy. Are you happy?" She handed me a lemonade before I could answer. Dad raised his tongs in salute from the grill, eyes crinkling. "There's my quiet one," he called, and the word quiet was less a label than a place we both knew. People hugged. Someone told an old story about Dad's legendary fishing failure when the boat drifted and the cooler floated off like a tiny blue island. Laughter pinged across the yard, softening corners. I let it wash over me and lined up paper plates, sliding them down to Mom, who added burgers like coins into the slots of a machine that prints memories. The box sat a foot from my wrist, unremarkable, and I could feel it like a small pulse under my skin. Kelly drifted back, orbit complete, followed by Cynthia, who had already angled her phone to find her good light. "Do a pan of the table," Kelly said, lowering her voice to a stage whisper. "Get the gifts." Cynthia's grin was glassy. "This filter is like unreal." She eased the camera across the bows, the glitter, the branded shopping bag with tissue rising like a cloud. Then she paused on my box. The lens didn't zoom, but her tone did. "What even is that?" she giggled. "Is this cardboard?" I swallowed a laugh that would have curdled into something else. "Paper," I offered. Kelly picked it up between two fingers, like she was rescuing it from itself. "Ilara," she said, slow and incredulous. "Did you make this on the plane?" She shook it once, as if listening for coins. The lid clicked lightly against the base. A couple of people nearby, stilled, curious. It doesn't take much for curiosity to become a crowd. It only needs one person who thinks they know the story. Matthew leaned in. "It's light," he said, performing the observation. "Coupon for free hugs?" A guy I didn't recognize haw-hawed. The laugh was a little desperate, like he was auditioning to be the kind of person who gets invited back. Kel, I said, and her name tasted like summer in our old room, split by a line of tape we moved each week. Put it down, please. She didn't, and the pause lengthened. The phone hovered. I could see Cynthia's screen, chat bubbles rising, tiny hearts skittering like fruit flies. It's strange what detail the mind chooses under pressure. Mine noted the precise angle of Kelly's wrist and the faint vein that only showed when she'd been drinking too little water and too much caffeine. It also noted the sound of Dad's spatula and how he stopped humming under his breath. Mom was already assessing. She always could tell what kind of storm was coming from the smell of the air. "Ladies," Dad called gently, "let's—" Kelly smiled wider. "It's fine, Dad. I'm just curious." She lifted the box a little higher so the lanterns draped it in light. "You're always so practical, Alara." The word landed soft, but meant plain. "Maybe we do a little unboxing?" She beamed at Cynthia. "People love unboxings." I felt the world narrow to a tunnel with a paper door. I thought about Tokyo again, meeting rooms where the jokes arrived 5 seconds late, where I put my head down and let code speak in a language people respected. I thought about the choice to keep my wins quiet because I'd learned too young that some people love you better when you're small. I thought about a clause Patricia and I had drafted that sounded clinical on paper and like kindness if you'd earned it. The box felt heavier in the air than it had on my hand. Cynthia's camera chimed with a new wave of notification pings. Okay, she whispered, thrilled at the oxygen of attention. "Say what it is." "It's my gift to Dad," I said, and my voice was even. "He'll open it." There was a micro tremor in Kelly's smile. It vanished so quickly, I would have missed it if I didn't know what her face looked like when we were 10 and the power cut out, and we lay on the floor whispering ghost stories to scare each other and ourselves. Then she exhaled the moment away, tossed her hair, and said to the invisible audience, "My sister made a box." The last word was a laugh. Cynthia snickered. Matthew checked the comment stream. "They're asking if it's a ring," he said, almost helpful, as if the internet were a person at the party. Or like one of those IOU vibes. I felt heat climb my neck and kept my eyes on Kelly's. "Put it down," I said again, a notch lower. "Or what?" she teased. There was a competitiveness in her I used to read as mean. Now I could see the outline of something else, hunger maybe, or fear, tidy as a seam beneath a dress. "Kelly," Mom said, soft but steel-lined. "Enough." That might have ended it if Cynthia hadn't shifted angle and grabbed a shot where the yard looked like a magazine spread and Kelly looked like the star. Attention is its own currency. We were all poor and rich in different ways. Kelly glanced at the screen, then at me, and made her choice. "Oh, come on," she said, too loud, and tossed the box. It arced under the lanterns. Paper, weightless, but to me it fell like brick. It hit the grass with a muffled thud and rolled, the lid skewing. A collective breath pulled and held. Someone laughed, then choked it back. Dad's spatula clanged against the grill, and he didn't pick it up. The smoke stung sweet in my throat. "Cheapskate," Kelly said brightly, and the word did its job. It turned heads. "Enough," Dad said, now with the voice that stops a dog in the street. He started forward, and Mom reached to catch his arm. "Alan," she warned quietly, "wait." Cynthia's screen was a carnival of hearts and knives. "We're live," she whispered to herself, forgetting we could all hear. Matthew, sensing a shift, raised his palms like a referee. Hey, it's a joke. We're joking." I couldn't make my body move. I watched a ladybug navigate a blade of grass near the crumpled box and thought, the world is still precise even when people are careless. The yard sound went thin, like someone turned the treble up. I heard shoes and grass. I heard my own heartbeat begin to count time. "Pick it up," Dad told Kelly. "Apologize to your sister." Kelly rolled her eyes as if we were 13 and I'd ratted her out for skipping algebra. "For what?" she sang. "For paper?" "For respect," Mom said. And for a second, Kelly's posture faltered. Something remembered. Then the camera tugged her chin back up. "You don't get to," Matthew began, but I didn't wait. I stepped past them and into the grass. Kneeling, I slid my fingers under the lid before damp could crease the fold. The paper felt like skin after a long bath. Soft, a little fragile, stubbornly itself. The ink inside would have bled if the fall had been harder. It hadn't. I exhaled so slowly it almost didn't count. When I stood, I didn't look at the crowd. I looked over their shoulders, past the lanterns and the fence, to where the dark began. Patricia was there, near the gate, black blazer, steady hands, eyes that never told me what to do and always made room for who I was. She didn't nod. She didn't need to. I knew she was close enough to hear me if I spoke. "I'll open it," Dad said from behind me, his voice thickening. He set down the tongs and wiped his hands on the old apron he wears like superstition. Mom drew beside him, her fingers pressed to the bone just above her throat. "Wait," Kelly blurted, sudden and sharp, as if she finally heard the silence we'd all been inside. Cynthia's camera wobbled. Even the comments slowed. I walked the paper box back across the lawn and placed it in Dad's hands. The lantern light put tiny moons in his eyes. For a breath, it was just us, the man who taught me how to notice the sound of a line tightening on a fish, and the daughter who learned to be still because sometimes stillness means you can feel a tremor before it breaks. "Happy birthday," I said. He lifted the lid. Dad's thumbs worried the paper lid as if he were afraid of hurting what was inside. For once, Kelly was silent. The backyard held its breath, 100 little sounds, ice settling in glasses, a lawn chair creaking, the sizzle of cooling metal, suddenly careful not to interrupt. When the lid came free, he didn't peer down immediately. He looked at me first, that searching parent look that asks, "Is this a joke? Is this a test? Is this the moment I should be the kind of father you need?" I nodded once. He looked into the box. He pulled out the first document like it might disintegrate, then handed it to Mom. Her eyes moved across the title, and even in lantern light, I saw the precise second she understood. Her breath hitched. "Alara," she whispered, and my name didn't fit in her mouth with all that shock. "What is it?" someone near the deviled eggs asked, because there is always one person who narrates for the room. Kelly broke first. "Don't be dramatic," she snapped, as if that could rewind everything. "It's paper. Gifts are fun. This is homework." Before the shape of the moment could warp, a calm voice joined us from the gate. "It's a trust," Patricia said, stepping into the ring of light. She didn't ask permission to approach because she never did the thing where a woman pretends to need permission to do her job. "Established by Ms. Quinn. Irrevocable as to the corpus. Revocable as to distribution schedules and individual beneficiary percentages." "Patricia," I said softly. She softened the language. "It secures your parents' debts, provides them with a lifetime stipend indexed to inflation, and establishes a fund for education and health. It also provides a discretionary branch for one additional family member, contingent on conduct and compliance." Cynthia's camera tried to drink the entire yard. "Oh my God," she whispered to the stream, forgetting to stage whisper. "Y'all, this is... wow." The hearts exploded like popcorn. Matthew straightened his jacket and adjusted his smile into something sincerity adjacent. It looked like a mask a salesman glued on in bad lighting. "How much?" asked the same person who'd narrated the eggs. It was tasteless to ask, which is why the question landed with perfect appetite. Patricia didn't look at me for clearance. We'd discussed this exact beat. $20 million in diversified assets, she said. Even, ordinary, almost boring. The word million did its job. Conversation fell through a trap door. Somewhere a fork clinked to a plate and didn't get picked back up. Mom's hand found Dad's forearm and stayed. Kelly laughed, a sound like someone choking on a pearl. "You're lying," she said too fast. "Alara doesn't... She lives like a grad student. She sleeps on a futon. She ran out of verbs. Matthew moved into the dead air. "First," he said, palms open in a universal gesture of harmlessness. "Wow. This is beautiful, Alara. A beautiful gesture. Family, taking care of family." He let the phrase preen in the lantern light. "And I know a lot about this space. Financial vehicles, tax-efficient growth. If I could just..." "Matthew," Dad said without looking up from the paper in his hands. There are ways of saying a man's name that make him smaller. Matthew's smile hiccuped and then kept going, but now it had to work twice as hard. Kelly turned sharp. "You could have told me," she hissed at me. Not to be included, just to know. Attention, more than money, had always been her oxygen. "You let me..." Her voice discovered its own echo back in time and boomeranged. She swallowed the rest. "I didn't tell anyone," I said. "Even them." I nodded at our parents. I wanted it to be about Dad's birthday, not about this. I didn't say money. I didn't say power. I didn't say the way a number changes what your face means to people. Patricia took the second page from Mom and flipped to the signatures, reading as if confirming that the universe still followed rules. The trust instrument is executed, she said to Dad, and funded. There's also an addendum that clarifies eligibility and amendment rights. She looked at me, then at Kelly, then at the camera, hovering like a dragonfly too close to a flame. In plain terms, love is unconditional, money can't be. Cynthia's screen stuttered, so many comments pouring through that the app lagged. They're saying this is fake, she breathed, half to the audience, half to the voice in her head that was always measuring what a moment might be worth. They want proof. I glanced at her, and the look must have been enough because she flushed. To whom? Patricia asked pleasantly. To your followers? The word followers sounded suddenly like people being led somewhere they didn't choose. No one here owes the internet anything. Kelly whipped toward Cynthia like a drowning woman toward a floating door. Turn it off. It came out jagged. Delete it. Cynthia faltered, thumb hovering. It's live, she said, nervous giggle trying and failing to lube the sentence. You can't just... She saw her reflection in the lens then, the hungry tilt of her own face, and for the first time all night, she looked a little sick. Dad finally raised his eyes from the print. He looked at me the way he used to when I brought home a found bird in a shoebox. Tenderness carrying its own kind of helplessness. You did this, he said, and it wasn't a question. For us. He glanced at Mom, at the yard, at the dumb little paper box that had become a meteor. He wiped his eyes with the heel of his hand, then laughed like a man catching himself being too human in public. Kid, he said, and I could hear all the times he'd used that word to tell me I didn't have to be anyone I wasn't. I wanted you secure, I said. I wanted you to breathe different. Mom cupped my face with both hands, the way she did when I was 8 and feverish. We could have loved you without this, she said, fierce and soft at once. We did. I nodded. I know. The crowd shifted in its skin, collective embarrassment spreading like a blush. Somewhere behind us, a neighbor said under their breath, she called her a cheapskate, and the shame of that word doubled back to bite. People who had laughed earlier now rearranged their mouths to look like they hadn't. It is astonishing how quickly the human face can edit itself. Kelly found a gear she used when cornered, contrition as performance. Alara, she started, voice pitched low and breathy, like commercials for forgiveness. I was joking. You know me. She reached for my hand. I didn't move, and the reaching hung in the air like a shrug you can't complete. Don't take me out, she said, the word me loud as sirens. We're family. Are we? Someone muttered. It could have been me in another life. Matthew seized the moment again, snake quick. What I think would be smart, he said, is if we sat down next week, me and you, Alara, and maybe Patricia here, and discussed how to optimize the discretionary branch. I have contacts who can multiply this. No need to cut anyone out when a rising tide. Patricia smiled like a courtroom blade. You are not a fiduciary, she said, nor are you invited into a discussion about a trust to which you are not a party. He opened his mouth and then closed it as if the sentence had removed his hinges. The comment stream on Cynthia's phone had found his full name. Someone typed Matthew, last name Angel Investor, and then 4 users posted screenshots of LinkedIn entries that looked invented in a hurry. His jaw tightened. For the first time, I believed he could feel heat. Kelly, Dad said, name heavy, apologize. She had never hated him as much as she did in that second. I saw the flicker of it, the way people hate whoever is closest when their real target is the mirror. I'm sorry, she said without a subject, an object, or a verb that meant anything. For what? Mom asked, gentle as a scalpel. Kelly's mouth pressed into a shape that wasn't language. For disrespect, she said finally, as if the word were bitter. To Alara. And to you. She dragged her gaze toward me and made her eyes wet. The camera loved her for it. The camera loves anyone who looks like they might break. I don't want you to perform, I said. I want you to understand. She flinched. I do. You don't, I said, because tonight was for clean lines. But you could. The yard had rearranged into a courtroom without a judge. The jury was 100 people who would all sleep in their own beds tonight and tell this story in the way that made them look best. I watched my sister vibrate between fury and fear, the two poles that had always powered her. She wasn't a villain, not really. She was a person who'd learned the wrong lesson from a world that paid inattention. "Here's the part that matters," Patricia said, voice clear enough to travel to the fence and back. "The trust names your parents as primary beneficiaries. There is a discretionary allocation for a third beneficiary, your sister, whose percentage and schedule are at Alara's sole discretion." She held up a second document, thinner, meaner. "And per the addendum Ms. Quinn and I drafted, that discretionary branch is explicitly tied to conduct. Public humiliation qualifies as cause for reduction or removal." The word cause cracked like ice. Head swiveled toward Kelly. Cynthia's camera, almost on instinct, zoomed for her face. Kelly exhaled a tiny animal sound. "You can't," she said to me, not to Patricia, not to Law. "You wouldn't." I thought of the line of tape we moved across the shared bedroom floor as kids, how we called it fair, even when we both knew one of us would tiptoe over it at night. I thought of Haneda at dawn and the way I promised myself I'd love my family without letting them unmake me. I thought of the small box patched together on a plain table and the way it flew and fell. "I haven't decided," I said. The yard became a held note. Patricia, steady as a metronome, slid the addendum back into my hands. "You don't have to decide now," she said, quiet enough for only our knot of people to hear. "But you do need to know you wrote yourself a compass. It points toward character." Kelly's lips trembled, anger trying to wear the mask of remorse. Matthew's smile finally failed. Cynthia's thumb hovered over the end stream button, suddenly unsure whether the story would love her or eat her next. And my parents looked at me like I was the weather and the roof at once. I folded the addendum and slipped it into the box, closing the lid with a soft, decisive click. The lantern swayed. A breeze lifted the edges of the paper and set them down again. I would decide, but not inside their hunger. That night, my phone lit up like a slot machine. 10 missed calls from Kelly, 4 voicemails, each one climbing the emotional register, from indignant to desperate to something close to crying. I didn't press play on the last one. I knew her rhythms too well. Tears were just another dialect in her language of persuasion. Matthew's number flashed once, then vanished. Cynthia didn't bother calling. She posted a Notes app apology on Instagram instead, blaming misjudged humor and peer pressure, as if she hadn't been the one who encouraged the crowd to laugh louder. I sat on the couch of my rented one-bedroom, the paper box in my lap, the city outside humming an orange sodium light. Patricia's voice still echoed. "You wrote yourself a compass." I traced the crease of the box lid with my thumb. It had held through turbulence, through ridicule, through grass stains. It could hold me through this. The next morning, Mom called. Her voice was gravelly from little sleep. "Your father's still reading the papers," she said. I pictured Dad at the kitchen table, the trust documents spread like a Sunday crossword. "He keeps stopping to polish his glasses. That's how I know he's overwhelmed." Then softer. "Alara, thank you. We can breathe for the first time in years." "I should have told you sooner," I said. My throat tightened. I didn't want money to be the first thing people saw when they looked at me. "You're my daughter," she said simply. "That's the first thing I see." Later, Patricia came by to finalize signatures. She slid an extra folder across my table. "One thing we didn't discuss last night. Your father co-signed a loan for Kelly 2 years ago, apparently. It's small compared to your portfolio, but if it defaults, it drags him with it. The trust can cover it, but..." She let the sentence trail. "But that means even if I cut her out, she still costs them," I finished. Patricia nodded. "Sometimes the boundary between protecting and enabling is only visible in hindsight." I leaned back, staring at the ceiling. I remembered being 12, asking Dad why he let Kelly borrow his car after she scraped the bumper. He'd said, "Sometimes you give second chances, not because they earned them, but because you can't stand to see them stranded." At 12, that had sounded noble. At 30, it sounded like a liability. By midweek, the party video had mutated online. Someone clipped the moment Kelly threw the box and looped it with the caption. She called her a cheapskate, but sis had $20 inside. It spread like a brush fire. Reaction videos, memes, think pieces on entitlement. Kelly's Instagram turned into a battlefield. Every photo captioned with emojis of boxes, money bags, and clown faces. She locked comments, then locked her account. Mutual acquaintances texted me variations of, "Are you seeing this?" I muted the threads. I didn't need to see her fall in 4K. Still, silence has its own weight. At night, I remembered things I hadn't asked for. Kelly at 15, sneaking me her sweater because she knew I hated my dress for the school concert. Kelly at 20, covering for me when I missed curfew after a date went wrong. There were layers under the sequins, I knew, but I also knew how she wielded those layers when cornered. Compassion as currency, love as leverage. 3 days later, Dad called. "She came by," he said, voice strained. "She was crying, Elle. Said she made a mistake." He paused. "Said you were going to cut her off." "She humiliated me in front of everyone," I said. "That's not a mistake, Dad. That's a choice." "She's still your sister." "She's still your daughter," I countered. "And she put your name on a loan that could sink you." The line went quiet. Then Dad exhaled, heavy. "I just want both my girls safe." After we hung up, I stared at the paper box on my table, now empty of documents, but full of memory. Safe and saved aren't the same thing, I thought. Kelly might never learn that difference. And yet, the compass Patricia spoke of wasn't just about money. It was about me, deciding what I stood for. The messages from Kelly kept coming, even after I blocked her. She found new numbers, new email accounts, even slid a note under Mom and Dad's door. "Please meet me, just once. I'll explain everything." I didn't reply, but I felt the weight of the choice pressing harder every day. Weeks slid by, quiet as dust. Nashville's autumn settled in, trees bruised red and gold, evenings sharp with the smell of wood smoke. I built a routine in my small apartment, coding late into the night for clients abroad, early coffee runs, Sunday calls with Mom and Dad. They sounded lighter now, almost giddy, like the weight of mortgages and bills had been peeled off their backs. Dad joked about buying a new tackle box. Mom started planning a trip she'd never let herself imagine before. The trust had already begun to work. But beneath their voices, I could hear another rhythm, Kelly's absence. She wasn't calling them much. When she did, it was clipped, defensive, almost rehearsed. I knew she was slipping, but I didn't chase the details. Until Patricia called. "Elara," she said, calm as always, "I've dug into that loan Kelly pulled with your father as guarantor. It wasn't just one. There's a cluster. Personal loans disguised as business startup costs. If she defaults, your parents are on the hook. I can restructure the trust to shield them, but it means swallowing her debts." I closed my laptop slowly, the screen glowed dimming. "How much?" "Not catastrophic for you, but significant enough that she was drowning long before the party." I pressed my thumb to my temple. She never said a word. "She never does," Patricia replied gently. I remembered Kelly at the party, flashing jewelry like armor, Matthew smirking behind her. Of course she hadn't said anything. Admitting weakness wasn't her way. It was Matthew's business to keep her pretending. And Matthew, he hadn't vanished completely. Rumors reached me through cousins. He'd been pitching investment opportunities to anyone who'd listen, dangling my name like bait. One cousin forwarded me a PDF Matthew had circulated, complete with a slide titled "Potential Quinn Family Capital Influx." My stomach dropped. He'd been planning to siphon from my trust before he even knew the details. Meanwhile, Cynthia tried to play cleanup. Her stream had gone viral, then toxic. She posted another apology video, voice trembling, insisting she never meant harm. But my inbox told another story. Screenshots from strangers showing how Cynthia had teased exclusive behind-the-scenes clips for her followers right before the party. She hadn't just stumbled into the drama. She'd staged it, nudged it along. The realization left a bitter taste. My humiliation had been content for them, a performance rehearsed with sequins, cameras, and smirks, and I had walked straight into it with my paper box. Then Mom mentioned something new. "Kelly's been asking us to meet for dinner. She says she wants to apologize properly." I froze. "Where?" "At that new downtown place. Very trendy, she says." Mom hesitated. "I don't know, Elara." She sounded nervous. Nervous wasn't Kelly's word. Kelly lived in bold fonts. If she was nervous, it was because the stage lights had shifted. Patricia called later that night. "If you go, record it, for your own protection. But I have a feeling you won't need to. Kelly's desperation is combustible." I lay awake, replaying her note slipped under my parents' door. "Please meet me. Just once. I'll explain everything." The word explain snagged in my mind. What explanation could undo years of cutting me down? What secret was heavy enough to finally crack her? The city outside was restless, sirens sliding through the dark. I stared at the paper box on my dresser, its folds soft now from too much handling. It had carried 20 million in secrets once. Maybe it still carried something, the proof that fragile things can hold. Kelly wanted dinner. I would go. But not to reconcile, not yet. I would go to hear the truth she'd been hiding, the one even money couldn't cover. The dinner was set for Friday night at a gleaming new spot downtown. White marble, brass fixtures, menus embossed with gold lettering that felt more like a performance than a meal. I arrived 5 minutes late on purpose, long enough to see Kelly already seated at a corner table, back straight, a dress that shimmered like she was clinging to an old identity. When she spotted me, her expression broke. First relief, then something else. Fear? No. Calculation, threaded with urgency. She stood to hug me, too quickly, her perfume sharp and cloying. Ilara, thank you for coming, she said, voice tight, words rehearsed. I came to listen, I said, sliding into the seat across from her. A waiter poured water. Kelly fiddled with her napkin, then set it down too neatly. I know what I did at Dad's party was unforgivable. I was showing off. I didn't realize what was in that box. You didn't care, I cut in softly. Not until the crowd turned. Her cheeks flushed. You're right, she admitted, surprising me. But I'm not here to beg for the trust back. I need to tell you something. That caught me. I leaned in. Then tell me. She glanced around the room, eyes darting past the polished mirrors and flickering candles. Do you remember when you applied for that scholarship in high school? The one that got you into MIT's summer program? I frowned. Of course. That scholarship had been the first door I'd ever cracked open, the one that made Tokyo possible years later. Kelly's voice lowered. The night before your interview, you were grounded for missing curfew. Dad said you wouldn't be allowed to go. The memory returned in fragments. Me sneaking back past midnight. Dad furious. Mom silent. And then somehow, I had been allowed to go anyway. I'd assumed Dad relented overnight. It wasn't him, Kelly said. Her fingers twisted the edge of her napkin until it frayed. It was me. I told them the weed they found in the glove box was mine. I froze. It was yours, I whispered, before realizing I had no proof either way. She shook her head. It wasn't. But I let them believe it, because if they thought it was yours, you'd lose everything. And I didn't want that. Her eyes shone, not with staged tears, but with something raw, vulnerable. You got that scholarship because I took the fall. You don't owe me for it, but I needed you to know. The air between us pulsed. For years, I'd painted Kelly only in shades of envy and cruelty, and yet here was another truth. Once she had protected me, even if it cost her. Before I could answer, a small red light winked from the side. I turned my head. Across the room, Cynthia sat at the bar, phone propped up discreetly on a napkin holder, angled straight at us. Kelly followed my gaze, paling. No, she said she wouldn't. She did, I said, my voice a low blade. I stood, walked across the polished floor, and plucked Cynthia's phone from its perch. The screen confirmed it. Live stream running, comments already rolling in. Sisters reunite, one read. Another. This is staged, LOL. I ended the stream with a single swipe. Silence rippled through the restaurant. Cynthia's mouth opened, closed. Lara, I thought it would help her image, she stammered. You thought wrong, I said, sliding the phone across the bar with enough force to rattle a glass. You don't get to sell our lives. When I returned to the table, Kelly's eyes were wet, her hands shaking. I didn't know she'd do that. I swear. I just wanted to explain. I believed her. For the first time in a long time, I actually believed her. But belief didn't erase damage. You wanted to explain, I said evenly. Now I want the raw files. Every clip, every draft, every recording Cynthia made. If you want any chance of me hearing you again, that's the price. Kelly nodded, trembling. I'll get them. As I rose to leave, I glanced once more at Cynthia, who was shrinking in her seat. She didn't realize it yet, but her game was over. And for the first time since the party, I felt the compass inside me point, not just away from Kelly, but toward something larger, accountability. The following Sunday, Mom insisted we come to the house for dinner. No fanfare, she promised, just family. Still, the weight of what had happened at the restaurant lingered. Kelly had texted me earlier that day. I have the files. Please, just hear me out one more time. When I arrived, Patricia was already there, a leather folder at her side. Dad greeted me with a bear hug that carried both gratitude and worry. The dining room table was set simply: roast chicken, mashed potatoes, Mom's cornbread. Comfort food, the kind meant to keep conversation grounded. Kelly entered last, carrying a USB drive like it was a relic. She looked smaller somehow, stripped of sequins and certainty, her makeup understated. She slid the drive across the table toward me. Everything Cynthia recorded, even the clips she never posted. I plugged it into my laptop. Patricia angled the screen so we could all see. The files weren't just from the party. They spanned weeks before. Footage of Kelly rehearsing lines in front of a mirror, Cynthia coaching her on what plays well online. Even Matthew chiming in, suggesting, toss the gift, make it a spectacle. My stomach turned. The party humiliation hadn't been spontaneous. It had been staged content from the start. Dad's jaw clenched. You planned that? Both of you? Kelly shook her head fiercely. I didn't plan that. I thought we were just teasing. Cynthia pushed me. Matthew pushed harder. I didn't know Alara's gift was... Her voice broke. I didn't know. Patricia pressed pause. Intent doesn't erase impact, she said calmly, but it does frame the choice Alara faces. I looked at Kelly. For the first time, she wasn't performing. Her hands were clasped tight, her voice trembling. I was wrong. Not just at the party. For years. I wanted attention because it felt like love. And when you started succeeding quietly, I didn't know how to compete with that. So I tore you down. She drew a shaky breath. But I don't want to compete anymore. I want to fix what I broke. The room fell into silence. Even the clock on the wall seemed to hesitate between ticks. I thought of the scholarship story she'd told me at dinner, the secret sacrifice I never knew she'd made. I thought of Dad co-signing her loans, of the glittering armor she wore to cover her fear. I thought of the compass Patricia said I'd written into the trust, character as the measure. Finally, I spoke. Here's what fixing looks like. You'll make a public apology, not just to me, but to Mom and Dad. You'll cut ties with Matthew and Cynthia. You'll start therapy, real therapy, not another performance. And for now, if you're included in the trust at all, it will be on a reduced, conditional basis. Every quarter, Patricia and I will review your conduct. If you slip back, it ends. Kelly's eyes filled. You'd still give me a chance? I met her gaze, steady. A chance, not a blank check. Dad reached for Mom's hand, relief flickering across his face. Mom exhaled as if she'd been holding her breath for months. Kelly nodded, wiping her eyes. I'll do it, all of it. Patricia clicked her pen, making a note. Then we'll draft the amendment accordingly. I closed the laptop, the weight of the files still heavy in my chest. This wasn't reconciliation wrapped in a bow. It was a contract, fragile, conditional, human. As we sat down to eat, I felt something shift. Not forgiveness, not yet, but the faint outline of a bridge, half built, waiting to see if both sides would meet in the middle. The final reckoning came 2 weeks later, back at my parents' home, the same backyard where it had all unraveled. Only this time there were no lanterns, no crowd, no laughter echoing off the fence. Just family, Patricia with her folder, and Kelly, standing without sequins, her posture brittle but determined. She'd kept her word, at least the first part of it. The files from Cynthia had been surrendered, the staged content exposed. Matthew had packed his things and left her, as predicted. Cynthia's accounts were bleeding followers by the day, her name tied to a scandal that no amount of miscommunication posts could fix. Kelly cleared her throat, voice softer than I'd ever heard it. Mom, Dad, Alara, I need to say this out loud. She clasped her hands, knuckles white. I was cruel. I let my insecurity turn into a show. I humiliated my sister and I shamed this family. I'm sorry. For once, there was no applause track, no phones raised. Just silence, weighted and raw. Dad nodded slowly. Words matter, but what you do next matters more. Patricia unfolded a document and laid it on the patio table. Here are the amended trust terms. Ilara remains sole authority. Your inclusion, Kelly, is conditional. Reduced allocation. Quarterly reviews. Removal upon breach of conduct. She slid the paper toward me for a signature, then toward Kelly for acknowledgement. Kelly's pen shook as she signed. I accept, she whispered. I studied her face, searching for the old mask of manipulation. Instead, I found something unfamiliar. Humility, maybe, or exhaustion. Either way, it was closer to truth than I'd ever seen her. Later, when the papers were tucked away, Mom brought out pie, as if sweetness could stitch the cracks. We ate in near silence, the clink of forks louder than words. When the plates were cleared, I stood, the night air cool against my skin. "This doesn't erase the past," I said, "but it gives us a map forward. If you want to stay in this family, Kelly, it won't be through glitter or cameras. It'll be through work, real work." She nodded, eyes rimmed red. "I'll prove it." As I walked to my car, the old yard stretched quiet behind me. The place where shame had once burned me alive now felt different, still scarred, but no longer fatal. The compass inside me was steady. Boundaries were drawn. Trust, fragile as paper, had been reshaped into something sturdier. And though love remained bruised, it was still here, conditional, cautious, but alive.